Welcome back to another episode of Business Journey Unlocked. I'm here today with Sandor Schoichet of Meridian Management Consulting. Sandor brings work with life science, biopharma, synbio, and clean tech in the navigating complex area where sustainability, pressure, and rapid technology change is at the forefront, often with moments of environmental, social, and governance strategies, and where execution collides. Sandor, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
To start, can you give us a quick snapshot of the types of decisions your clients are calling you for with right now with Meridian?
Yeah, sure. Well, one thing to be clear is Meridian is a little bit of a hybrid company. There's two main things that I do under this heading. One is I'm a member of a group here called the Alliance of Chief Executive Officers, which is a CEO mutual support organization and platform that I've been part of for several years. And the other thing that I run is a group called the Biopharma Sustainability Roundtable. And part of the story, the journey over the last 14 years or so, has been the growth of the Biopharma Roundtable Group to become the primary business activity of Meridian. So that's kind of an interesting story there, and that's part of what I'd like to go into.
Yeah, of course. Obviously, you work with companies at the intersection of life sciences, sustainability, and regulation, where mistakes are expensive and timelines are pretty extensive with your expertise. What, in your line, what did leaders consecutively get wrong in these type of environments that made you realize traditional consulting, the big tables, were actually what needed to be done in order to kind of get everything in the round table, as you mentioned?
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting history. Meridian really got kicked off of, I know this is going back a little bit, but I promise it answers your question. Meridian really got kicked off at the end of 2008. We had a big financial downturn, as you may recall. The consulting company I was part of at that time, a group called PRTM, had an active life science practice here on the West Coast based in San Francisco, and they shut it down. They let everybody with the life science practice go, and the rest of the company was absorbed into PwC, which is a story for another time. But what happened is I created Meridian together with another colleague who had left, and we continued the consulting work with life science and biopharma companies here in the Bay Area. And most of our work was really change management, program planning, vendor selection, systems architecture, all those kind of things that if you have deep experience in an industry, you can kind of guide large system projects that are being built and how they are implemented. At the request of our clients, we started a backdrop conversation called the Capital Asset Management Roundtable, because that was the core of the work that we were doing, implementing and designing large capital project management systems, reviewing the life of large projects like that, systems architecture, change management around that. So that became a very busy focus of activity. And what happened is, it's not that companies were doing something wrong or that the large consulting firms aren't useful. It's that there was another element that was missing, which was really a forum for peer executives to talk with each other, to understand what was happening in the industry, to share best practices, to share even not best practices, just how you deal with different kinds of situations. And a topic that kept coming up more and more in that conversation was all this crazy new environmental stuff. People wanted to put in water meters. People wanted to have alternative sources of electricity. People wanted to put solar panels on a roof. And where that fits into the internal capital planning process just wasn't clear. We were having discussions about internal hurdle rates for renewable electricity versus a normal capital project, about buying a startup company instead of putting in water meters for everything in the production line. So that became a bigger and bigger focus, and there really wasn't any large companies that were doing consulting work in that area. There were many small ones, but it was all kind of a new area, and it was just happening in the biopharma industry. So in 2013, we ended up rebranding the Capital Asset Management Roundtable to become the Sustainability, Biopharma Sustainability Roundtable,
Hmm.
because that was the focus area where there really wasn't the backdrop and other consulting services that were focused on this community.
Even with the rebranding, how were you able to strategically get the credibility and initially get that inertia and the momentum to build where you are currently right now?
Okay. That's an interesting question. It really came from a focus on facilitation, right? We
Hmm.
still have this focus, life sciences industry only, sustainability issues that lets us have a very clear focus on what want to talk about, and also on finding the right people to participate in the discussions from each company. We took a stance that our role was basically to be facilitators, to gather knowledge, to find key experts in the area, and to bring them into the discussion and facilitate the discussion. So our expertise basically grew as a side effect of participating in the groups that we were facilitating, right? We never tried to say, we have the answer, or this is the right thing to do, or buy this system from me and it'll fix it, right? It was, how can we, as a community of people all involved in the life sciences, all with a goal of running our businesses in a more sustainable way, how can we support each other? Right. And I think that has been a really powerful lesson all through everything we've done since then, that given half a chance, given the space, given the mental space, people are very interested in supporting their colleagues, in seeing our whole sector do better from an environmental and sustainability point of view, and just in general are very willing to help each other. And if we provide a forum that is confidential, that is got the right people in the room, that brings the right expertise to a discussion, then it becomes a very natural way of engaging everybody. And the group has just grown organically over that time. We've never done any real advertising. It's really clear who we should be talking to in each company. And it's more a question of reaching out to them, showing them the community that's available for them to participate in, and engaging them in the conversation. And it sort of naturally has built a community around these ideas.
I agree, especially given the stance you're going with the round table. It's more selective as opposed to grabbing anyone that shows slight interest. It's just essentially
Right.
weeding the cropped to get the people that actually would
Exactly.
be more beneficial.
And this is a thing that has been sort of consistent in building the business. There's so many people who come and say, well, would you like to see our mailing list of 10,000 people of this sort? And we'll go like, please, we don't need 10,000 people. We don't want to do marketing. We don't want to do sales. We don't want to do that kind of outreach. What we want to know is, who are the peers and colleagues of the people who are in the discussion now? Who are the experts that they would like to hear from? And then when we reach out directly to those people, it's not a marketing pitch, it's an invitation, right? To come and talk to
Exactly.
your peers, to be part of this conversation, to share your expertise with the people that you're trying to reach. And that's sort of the basis on which we've operated.
Going
Now, the
towards
other thing go ahead.
no, you first.
So the other thing I wanted to say is, kind of think about this serendipity in the way things grow. The very first roundtable that we put on was sponsored by Bloomberg. So we had the privilege of they have beautiful offices on a pier in the San Francisco waterfront. And we were co-sponsored by Genentech, where I had worked previously and was currently doing consulting work. Genentech was in the process of being purchased by Roche. And the Roche people sent an observer from their executive corporate sustainability committee to see what those crazy people in California were getting into here. That turned out to be my first partner. He was operating as an independent advisor for Roche and could operate as an independent advisor with me as well. And for the last 13 years, we've been putting on these events as a team. And so he's based in Zurich, I'm based in California, and that kind of gave us the geographic spread to address this market, which is mostly in North America and Europe.
That's awesome. Going on Meridian for a moment, what's the one principle that you refuse to compromise when you're helping clients either in innovation, compliance, or just the regular pressure within the industry?
So one principle, I don't know if I could articulate one principle that's an issue like that. Um, all right, I'm sorry. Can you take a break for just a second? Hold on.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I hope you can fix it
No worries.
later.
I certainly can. Don't worry
But
about
I
it.
don't know. So I don't know if there's one principle. I would say, just from a consulting point of view, I've always thought of consulting almost like therapy. Full disclosure, my wife is a therapist. And so I have a view of consulting as almost doing family therapy, right? Working with clients. And so I really came of age as a consultant thinking about organizational design, organization as technology, change management, the way that technology changes work, right? One of the first kind of big projects I did, we were implementing distributed workstations. That's called PCs now, right? On a network. And that was all new, but it changed the jobs, the way that people work, the kind of work that you could give them, the way you would structure an organization. And so I've always thought about things that way. How do we communicate what we're doing? How do we think about the way that people's jobs will change? How do we think about the way the organization is structured to take advantage of the changes that we're making and really to help the organization work through that? So I don't know if that quite answers your question, but that's how I've always approached consulting work.
And that's a fine approach. And it it does answer my question. Going on ESG strategies for a moment, where do you think companies tend to oversimplify that strategy or even the sustainability aspect? And given
Yeah.
that oversimplification, what do you think is the hidden cost of doing that approach?
Okay. Well, so this is a bigger picture. Basically, things have expanded over the years from environmental concerns about like water use and where you're getting your electricity to social impact, especially in life sciences, which medicine is such an important part of our society, to governance roles. And as that has developed, there have been a whole series of groups putting out checklists or scorecards or ratings about how companies are doing. And so often the very first thing that companies start doing is thinking of it as a check the boxes compliance exercise. We need to have a report and it has to cover this topic and that topic and the other topic. And they hire somebody to write a report, tell a few nice anecdotes about what they're doing, and put it out and then feel like, well, we've addressed that risk. Whereas the more mature point of view about ESG and sustainability issues is that it's a complement to the financial focus that is, the historical core from a business point of view. going from saying our goal is to make the most amount of money that we possibly can now, to saying we want to build a high value business for the long run that will continue to generate profits and value for society over time. And when you take a longer term point of view and you think a little bit more inclusively about the impact of business in the social world, that really starts to become the modern idea of sustainability. And so companies that only think of it as a compliance or a risk management, sort of a check the box kind of activity, are missing out on the more um, mission driven, high value way of thinking about it, that it's not a separate thing from running your business. What it is a little broader context and a little more inclusive way of thinking about what the business objectives are, that addresses interests and concerns of your employees, that addresses concerns and impacts of the society around your business, that thinks about the longevity and uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Resilience of your supply chain, right? All these things that keep a business running. We've had very specific examples of that in the life sciences. For example, a few years ago, there was a big hurricane in Puerto Rico. It turns out that's where almost all the pharma companies had their packaging plants. It was a major supply chain and healthcare impact for the whole country because of the over-reliance on that one location and not thinking about the sustainable supply chains. There's, I could go on a variety of examples like that, but it's just a way of broadening the focus. I think of it as a little bit more mature way of thinking about business in general, its relation to society, its relation to other stakeholder groups like your own employees, and especially the investor community. One of the things that I've really been appreciating in recent years is how the generational change in people's interests has forced the investment community to think about new investment vehicles that focus on businesses which are behaving in a more sustainable, mature, socially aware way. So they've been pushing on businesses to evolve in this way as well. And as soon as you start doing it, then now it becomes material to the business what the investors want to see. And
Mhm.
that's now all in the process of getting baked into regulations, particularly in Europe, but a little bit here, and very actively in Southeast Asia and other places as well. So even though there's a bit of a pushback right now politically within the US, don't see it changing the way any companies are actually behaving. Maybe it's changing the way they talk a little bit in public. But in the rest of the world, this is all rolling forward. And all of these healthcare companies are global players, so they can't only cater to politics in the US.
I do agree on your standpoint that there truly is no separation when running a business. It's from the lines around, it's not short term. You got to think on the long term value. You got to think
Mhm.
on the long term clients that you would get as well. If people just focus on the short term gratification, what's going to happen? Their business is eventually going to crumble. They're so focused on
Mhm.
chasing the money. I'm a big proponent on money's the byproduct. Money will come if you truly
Yeah.
enjoy what
Mhm.
you do.
Right. So this is something I subscribe to as well. It's a little different when you think about large companies like, Pfizer or Merck or Glaxo, something like that. They can't, it's not quite as clear to do what you love. But on the other hand, these companies are very dependent on what's generally called the social license to operate. Uh, the opinion of patients, the opinion of medical care providers, the opinion of investors, the opinion of governments on how they're behaving. They're at the effect of shareholders, uh, regulations in different countries. So there's a whole web work that's sort of encouraging companies to move in this direction. Some ways, and for some companies, it may feel a little overwhelming. For others, it's what's needed. But it
Mhm.
feels like the entire sector is kind of maturing in the way it thinks about uh, what does it mean to deliver value beyond a particular pill or an injection? What does it mean to have a sustainable role in society where you can recruit the people that you need to come and do the research, where you can recruit patients for medical trials, where you can have the credibility of healthcare providers and governments to use the drugs that you develop? And when that's lost, like with the opioid crisis recently and so on, it's a big impact on the whole sector.
Based on that, where do you think would be the most major strategic change in the next 12 to 24 months in those areas that you just briefly covered?
Yeah. Well, two things I'm going to say. One is sort of boring, and that's regulatory implementation, right? There's a whole series of very key and important regulations and standards that have really been coming into effect over the last year or two, and will become law in most of the European countries, affecting most companies over the next year or two, depending how big the company is, et cetera. Um, that's really going to make a lot of these sustainability and ESG efforts normal, right? A normal expected part of business. Just like you would have an accounting department to deal with money, you might have an ESG department that deals with other impacts of the company on the environment and the supply chain and society. And they really come together in a coordinated management way. The other thing that I'm going to say is going to be maybe more topical, and that's AI is going to be a very big impact in the whole healthcare sector. There are some obvious ways, like using it for R&D, right? We can develop new molecules or analyze data sets in a better way, manage laboratory experiments in a better way, and all the companies are active with that. But on a more subtle way, AI is going to become a major tool for how you run organizations, right? How you look at accounting, how you think about your impact in the world. And one of the big efforts that is just getting started now, but I think is very intriguing, is an effort to use AI tools to look at both the financial reporting and history of a company and at their sustainability or ESG reporting, and to try to link the two things so that you can literally see how the budget and revenues of the company connect to the activities that they're doing on an environmental or social impact level, and put one more coherent story together, both for people within the company and for investors and for the public at large. Um, a lot of these performance rating companies are, I think, going to be superseded because people will just ask Chat GPT, right? Or ask Grok. We don't need to have a whole analytic company that's producing these reports. We can just ask. So that's going to change things too. And then, of course, the way the AI systems look at a company is based on the data that they can get. And so everybody's having to rebuild their websites and their reporting and so on so that they're, I don't know, AI friendly in some way. But this is sort of changing the whole mindset in the way people think about data and reporting and public relations, because it's almost like there's a whole new player in the room that didn't used to be there.
Oh, most definitely. The biggest concern that I see, especially in healthcare, is revolving around the confidentiality aspect with reporting, with the clientele under the company's umbrella. But
Hmm.
as you mentioned, it's gonna come towards healthcare. It's gonna come to all these other companies. It's either from the fact they're either gonna implement it or they're not gonna implement it. If they don't, some might be fine for a while, some companies, some organizations, but over time, with any artificial intelligence, it just produces more efficient processes within the companies
Hmm.
so they can focus on more revenue-based activities. That's a grand
Yeah.
scheme of things. And
And I think that's really right. And this
Mhm,
goes back to the comment I made earlier, where organization is a technology.
I
And
agree.
in large measure, what's happening with AI is we are gaining a new class of employee is a way to think about it. And this new class of employees needs to be managed and have oversight and have assignments and have, you know, track how well they're doing, just like any other employee that you would have. Now, obviously, they're different than humans, but humans are very similar. We don't do perfect. We sometimes hallucinate, right? We make mistakes. We have imperfect information, and that's what organization is about. You have a collection of people, you have reviewers, you have oversight, you have training. The same thing is going to have to happen with these AI systems as well. How they get integrated into an organization, and we haven't seen too many organizations like that. There's quick stories about, oh, we don't need to hire a lawyer anymore because we just ran the contract through, right? Or not hiring any junior programmers anymore because Copilot can do it. And that probably will create issues in the short term because you're knocking out steps on the career path. Like, where is the next expert programmer going to come from if you don't hire any junior ones? But I think that'll all get worked out.
Some people find with using all of these different LLMs, the ChatGPT, Grok, as you mentioned, it is in a way, as of this moment, a little uncomfortable because it's entirely new horizons within the forefront.
Hmm.
Besides looking at the technology aspect, if a CEO within your industry wanted to get ahead, especially within this quarter of 2026, what's the first uncomfortable move that they should make?
Ah, well, here I have one to share because I just went through it myself. I think you have to get hands-on with some of the tools. You have to go take a class or a boot camp or something like that. I had the privilege of joining a CEO boot camp where we spent the whole day and everybody built a couple of applications. Right? We had a training crew there, walked us through how to do it, some of the foibles and issues with some of the tools. And then everybody actually built an application or use the tool for a real purpose. Uh, and that was eye opening. There's sort of nothing special or different about these systems from a tool use point of view, except that you have to actually do it, right? If as a CEO, if you end up sort of in the clouds going, oh, we need to do this and oh, we need to do that, you end up in the place. There was a big report that came out of MIT a few months ago, basically saying something to the effect of less than a quarter of businesses really get the value that they're expecting or looking for out of an AI project. And that's exactly the trap. If you don't understand what a tool is, what you could expect or what it takes to use it effectively, then you're going to end up with a bunch of pilots that don't really go anywhere. But you said uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for a lot of CEOs to sit in a learning seat, to go to a class, go to a workshop, go to a boot camp where they're going to learn something new that they haven't done before. But you really have to.
You do, you really have to, and it's just a hands-on approach that would allow other people in that similar situation to truly understand what these tools are. Because even with ChatGPT, even with Grok, you can type in any prompt, but it's from the fact is it's not going to be able to output exactly what you're looking for unless you type in the certain language to get that. And that's just
Hmm.
understanding what to say,
Yeah.
understanding how to use it. That's all comes down to going down, sitting down,
Hmm.
actually going into the books, in the classroom, in the workshop that you were in before. It's from the fact is,
Hmm.
even though you can get certain individuals to do certain activities similar to this, if you don't truly understand even just a basic framework of it, you're not gonna succeed.
Hmm.
As you mentioned with the reporting, you said 25%. Where's that 75? They're either relying too much on it, they're not understanding how to do it, or they're just simply going
But
into it and
I
just
think
overly
the
depending on it.
it was more the first, right? It was
Mhm.
I think the main thing I took away from that report was the number of companies that were willing to spend money on just doing a pilot without really having a strategic goal and without investing the time and energy to really understand what they were trying to do.
I see.
A certain amount of that's fine. Okay, you play with something and you get an idea. But if it's not part of a plan to understand it and think about strategically how it connects to the business, then you end up with, and this happens all the time with systems over the years. You end up with a pilot that doesn't really address the real problem, that you didn't really understand what it took to make it happen. And then you go, oh, well, that was a waste of time and you don't get the value from it. So one thing I'd like to change is I don't want to spend too much time on this AI thing, but from a business point of view, I'd like to comment on something else, which is kind of the issue of organic growth. One of the concerns that I've had over the years, keeping our focus on the biopharma sector and uh, its intersection with sustainability and ESG issues, was that it was excessively limiting our market. We'll put it that
Mm.
way, the number of companies that could participate. And over the years, I've been consistently surprised by all the organizations that come out of the woodwork that we didn't know about, that we weren't aware of, that got introduced to us basically because the topic is pulling them. A colleague will point someone out or invite someone or tell us to reach out to somebody. And so the circle of interest has grown. The same thing has happened in the investor community. We started inviting an investor or two to give a talk on an online thing. And now we have sort of a full-blown investor network because they're interested in these issues as well. And their funds get rated on their sustainability performance, just like companies do. So there's a big interest from the investor community in this. And now there's other areas that are coming to the fore too. And it's all being people in the current roundtable making introductions and suggesting ways to expand the conversation. So this year, we're going to be spending some time on what is effectively voice of the customer, reaching out to healthcare delivery organizations, hospital networks, and so on, that are part of the downstream biopharma supply chain or value chain. Another area that I wasn't expecting, but we're getting pulled into is animal health. It turns out
Mm.
that companies that deal with veterinary medicine are full-blown biopharma companies. They have different reimbursement strategies and they have different clients, but they develop drugs and market them. They're worried about adverse events, everything else. And in general, the broader life science area, there's a whole world of companies that do diagnostics and reagents and devices and so on that are part of the healthcare world that we really haven't focused on and that need a different business model because they're not as big as the large pharma companies. So it's been a real eye opener how the world has sort of expanded bit by bit because we've remained focused on a core discussion, which is sustainability issues in the life sciences sector, particularly. And so little by little, all the people who care about that have found us.
And it's just growing your web too. The hardest thing, especially building the credibility, is just starting out, especially with the outreach as well. You have the
Mhm.
core foundations, but you're just expanding your web into different areas under the same scope.
Mhm.
That's the most beautiful thing.
Uh,
Given where it's going in 2026, given the roundtable, given Meridian, where do you personally feel the most tension right now, either in scaling demand, protecting delivery quality, getting the certain credible sources in the
mhm.
roundtable?
Yeah. Well, that's a top of mind question. Uh, the biggest issue for us right now is scaling, is continuity and scaling. We are now a small practice. There's three key partners, and we are kind of at the limit of what we can do as three people. even with virtual assistants and other things like that helping out. And so the issue now is finding and bringing on additional partners that are simpatico, that will fit to our team, that bring additional skills, maybe more emphasis on the investment world, or the animal health world, or the healthcare delivery world, uh, while maintaining sort of a geographic spread, right? We need to be able to deal with companies in Europe, in Southeast Asia, in North America. And so uh, we have a pretty complex set of requirements really for additional partners. But that's what we need to do, is sort of open up our little team here and grow it into more of a real business, right? We're not trying to hire 15 consultants, right, and start doing systems work. We want to stay at the kind of very senior advisory level that we've been operating at, but it's a challenge to find more people who will fit that mold. And that's, I think, the top issue for us this year.
Well, it's also going to the qualities and capability that you're looking in the roundtable as well. You're not looking for anybody to join your team. You're looking for certain expertise, certain skill
Yeah,
sets, certain experiences. And that's just the quality over the quantity.
yeah.
Looking
They
in terms of where you're going in scaling, is there anything in your area that you've chose not to scale more efficient because of that tension with the scaling into different areas of markets?
Yes, actually, that's a very good question. And yes, there is. There's a whole piece of the life science sector which essentially is supply chain partners to the large biopharma companies. And there's groups of companies, clinical research organizations, contract manufacturing organizations, reagent suppliers, manufacturing equipment vendors, and so on, who have all been on their own. They're legitimately interested in the sustainability and ESG issues. They're businesses. They have their own issues and reporting they need to do. And when you're a vendor to a larger company, you become part of their supply chain. And so your performance is part of their performance. And so there's a legitimate issue there. Like, how do they manage this so that they fit in and it adds to their attractiveness as a supply chain partner? Right. On the other hand, we can't have them be part of the roundtable, because you can't have a executive level confidential discussion about best practices and what's happening in your different companies if there's a bunch of vendors in the room, right? Which is what this would be. So we've thought about perhaps creating a separate group for those companies, um, just because the issue is it's maintaining a safe place for frank executive discussions. This is the same thing that goes on in the CEO Alliance group that I'm part of. And that's been key for us, and that we get a lot of positive feedback on, that we've created a platform where the right people can have frank, substantive discussions with each other in a reasonably confidential manner. Right. And so we can't have vendors. We also are very careful about managing consultants that come in, right? If a consultant comes to one of our meetings, it's just for that one session, and they're only there because they were part of a project that a roundtable member is sharing, right? So that's been very key, and we have to remember that and stay focused on that.
Mm. You've advised leaders making decisions where the downside is real and could be very detrimental in terms of regulatory risk, capital risk, and reputational
Hmm.
risk, where there essentially is no, well, exactly when there is no clear data and there's no safe option, what decision principle do you personally trust the most in that area?
Well, I'm thinking there's very few situations in which there's no guidance and no data, right? Uh, Things can be unclear, that's for sure. Um, But I think that through all the conversations that we've had, the most important value is to remember what the mission of the organization is, right?
Mm.
And to stay focused on that. 'Cause that's if an organization exists and is making money, then they are doing something that people want. And if you can keep your focus on supporting that in a honorable, ethical way, right? Then things tend to play through. I mean, that's my experience. I don't have any sort of first person, way like, oh, we're trying to make a decision and we have no data. So what do we do? It's like, well, you almost always have data or an indication or a historical trend. You certainly have input from your clients, from your investors, from your board, from your employees. And if you can think about what builds a long-term value to the business, right? How is this business going to look in a few years from now, depending on what action you take? Will it still be serving this group of clients? Will it still be honoring the commitments you've made? That seems to be the best guidance.
And that in turn would help the businesses stay grounded. Sure, the businesses can pivot, and that's completely natural. But it's from the fact is if you still have the core fundamentals on the reason why you started, who you're targeting, and what the benefit is on having
Mhm.
you on their team,
Mhm.
that's the best thing. Because when people get so wrapped up, as we mentioned before, on the monetary value, they forget why exactly they started. And that's the
Right,
one thing that you should have in the back of your mind. Before we
right.
wrap up here, what's a personal habit or belief that you have that you carry day to day that has allowed you to succeed and get where you are right now with the roundtable with Meridian as well?
Well, there's two things. Um, One is whatever it is that you're thinking about doing, no one else is going to do it for you, right? You got to do it yourself. You got to uh, step up, make the appointment, reach out to somebody, ask for advice, call that client, call that partner, uh, you know, write up the draft idea in the middle of the night, whatever it is. You've really got to do it yourself and take that action because no one else is going to do it for you. This is sort of from a leadership point of view. The other one is to kind of stay focused, mission focused. I would say when PRTM shut down the life science practice on the West Coast, what we really wanted to do was the fellow who started Meridian with me. Uh, what we really wanted to do is to have a mission driven consulting business. We wanted to stay focused on the life sciences and healthcare because that is a good for society. And we wanted to help companies do well and develop and bring to market new therapeutics. In a real sense, that's still what even the roundtable is about, even though we're not doing individual consulting projects on a specific drug. We are working with companies to help them advance the way that they operate so that they're more inclusive from a patient population point of view. So they're addressing market requirements for access to healthcare and access to medicines, so that they're thinking about their governance model, so that they are building a long-term license to operate in the communities and the different cultures around the world where they operate. And that's been the key from my point of view, why this is worth the energy and worth the effort and worth the push to make it happen.
For anyone who's listening or watching this, what's the best place for them to reach out either to you, Meridian, and either to get their seat into the roundtable?
Well, the on the web, it would be biopharmasustainability.com. That's the website for our roundtable, and you can see what we're doing and who all else is involved with it there. For me personally, it would be through LinkedIn, Sandor Schoichet on LinkedIn. talks about some of my other activities, and you can see what I'm up to there.
Amazing, Sandor. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I really do appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate the chance to go through this story and share it. I hope it inspires or at least motivates a few other people. Thank you.